Hold up.
Good afternoon, SMU. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. Do you mind if I get a few heck yeahs in the chat window just to make sure no one is not hearing this wonderful voice of mine? Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys all for making it. We're sorry about the confusion on time. You know how we all live in different time zones, and so sometimes times get messed up, but we love that you're here, and I'm pretty excited to have this opportunity from Rachel and her team about talking to you guys today about target market. So I'm sure you hear this buzzword and a lot of folks talk about it. But today, pretty much the objective of the masterclass is I'm going to go through a few slides on what target market is and how we can really help you build it for your social media business. And then what I'd love to do is leave some time at the end and maybe take some questions, because one of the most powerful things I find when I teach classes like this is getting questions from each and every one of you specific to your challenges in your business and trying to answer it live and trying to answer it together. So not just me answering it, but maybe there are other folks in the chat that have experienced similar things and kind of want to offer their 2 cents. So what I'll do is I'm just going to get started right away. I'll assume, again, if no one can hear me, if there's a challenge, we'll hear from somebody else. Somebody in the group will let me know. So, I go to the next slide. There we go. My name is Bob. So I have been an entrepreneur for about 15 years. I know I don't look it. It's really the oil of Olay twice a day. Fine lines are visibly reduced. But I've been doing this for 15 years. So everything I'm going to talk about today is everything I've experienced, both the highs and the lows, what's worked, what hasn't worked. This isn't just me talking to you about theory for the most part. This is me telling you, again, what's worked and what hasn't worked. I've worked both in the private sector and the public sector. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've worked for boutique marketing agencies, but I've also worked for our government here. I'm actually based in Canada, in Ontario. And so I've worked for a lot of government agencies around small business consulting. So I've gotten to work with clients of all levels, clients who are just sort of starting out, trying to break out of their 9-to-5, and clients who've been doing it for years. So again, everything we talk about today, just to give you some perspective, that's where it really comes from. First I wanted to talk about what is target market. The reason why I think that's an important first thing to talk about, yay, Canada! Hi, Nicole. The first thing I think is really important is I think a lot of us hear the word target market. It's a cool buzzword. You see it all over the place. You see lots of consultants using it. But what does it really mean? And for most of us, it pretty much means the perfect client for you. Now, what's really important to understand is, although it's the perfect client for you, it can evolve because you're going to evolve. You and your business, as you start out, are going to evolve and find different clients that work, a little bit better with you, or find different niches that you prefer to be in. So understand, when you develop your perfect client, your target market, it doesn't have to stay static. It is something that can evolve as your business evolves. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have a huge sort of scope in your target market. For example, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've asked another business owner who their perfect client is, and they look at you dead in the face and say, everybody, and you kind of think, not so much. It really is about paring down to who that is. But a target market can also be the perfect client for your client. And that's important to understand, because although your client might be the perfect client for you, their clients might not be. So sometimes target markets differ in terms of who your perfect client is and who the perfect client for your client can be. So it's really important to understand that distinction. It can also be a specific cohort of a particular campaign. So in social media, we're all running different campaigns based on Facebook ads, based on sort of different initiatives that our clients need us to do. It may be for a specific client. I'll give you an example. This is always true in tourism. If you've ever worked in any part of tourism, whether it's for hospitality, bed and breakfasts, tourism attractions, specific cohorts differ by season. Who you get in a tourism attraction in the winter is not always the same people that you get in the summer. So target markets can vary based on campaign. So again, don't feel like every campaign you do, it has to match this particular target market. It's all about the objectives that you're trying to achieve. And of course, another thing to understand is your target market can actually have layers. So, I get to meet a lot of entrepreneurs who kind of get stuck in, this is my perfect client and this is who I want. But that can actually break up. You can have different layers based on age or based on needs. So again, don't get stuck on everything, every characteristics being static. You can have 90% of the characteristics being static and 10% dividing them into two segments of target market. So that's really important to understand. It's basically giving yourself forgiveness to kind of be able to float around and to kind of try different elements of what works for you. The core value being, though, that you're trying to get a specific market. You're not trying to get everybody. From now on, by the way, when I say everybody, we're going to do it that way dramatically because it'll really get attention. Everybody. So that's important to understand. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I'm really struggling with slides today, is, how do you figure out who your target market is? So, who do they currently look like? And by that, I mean, sometimes when you're figuring out your target market, there's somebody out there, a perfect client, that's exactly them, whether it's based on gender or demographic or income, or just the fact that they pay your bill without giving you a hard time. If you know someone like that, and maybe they're not even your client, you just know someone like that, you want to build your target market around that because, and again, that's based on those characteristics that suit you. But the really important thing to understand about target market, and I get this a lot with entrepreneurs, is you got to like your target market. So a lot of times I'll meet entrepreneurs who say, yes, my target market is really obscenely rich people. And the problem with that is they don't like them. Their core values don't match. You don't get along. You don't understand a lot of the things that they value because you may not yet be filthy rich. So it's really important. So as much as you might say, I want the affluent client or the rich client, you have to really ask yourself, is that a client I can resonate with? Because if you develop a target market you can't resonate with or empathize with or connect with, you'll never be able to reach them. It'll just be a constant exercise in frustration, for sure. Now, if you don't have anyone in your life, if you don't have anyone in your network that can look like that perfect client, make them up. What does that look like? What do they look like? Literally, what's your dream client? And you can, Rachel before has talked about vision boards. You can vision the heck out of this ideal here, but you really want to, what's their income like? What's their, what gender are they? Are they married? What are their kids like? But more importantly, what you'll find when you're making them up is they'll probably be a lot like you. And those are the target markets we most resonate with, or markets that we understand best that are just like us. Another thing is think of an example from a competitor. So is there somebody that you follow? For example, I'm a huge fan of the work that Rachel does. I love the work that Marie Folio does. So a lot of times I'll look at what is it that how are Rachel and Marie communicating to that market that I think we kind of all share? What do they look like? How do they communicate? So, there are different ways of developing your target market. It isn't just about, wow, I want to work with just lawyers because I was a lawyer. It's more about their personal characteristics, their core values, who their clients are going to be, and can you communicate with that? And another key difference in target market is target markets differ if you're doing B2C or B2B. Now, B2C means business to consumer. So are you selling to end users? Are you or your client selling to end users? Or are you doing B2B, which is business to business? Are you selling your services to other businesses? So a good example might be, if you're doing social media management, you're probably selling those services to another business, right? Because they're trying to master their social or have you master their social to be able to sell to whomever it is they want to sell. But if you're selling a widget that just changes the life of somebody, that might be a consumer. And so those target markets are typically different. A consumer target market is personal characteristics. A business target market might be more about the decision maker in a company that's going to do that business with you. The best part I love asking when it comes to target market is, are you sure? It's one thing to say to yourself, Bob, I totally know that this person, John, is my perfect client because everything they do is great. But are you sure that that's a client that you can succeed with? Have you validated that that's a great client? Can you resonate with them? Is there a synergy there? Is there affluency in terms of, is that what you need? Are you looking to help startup businesses that don't have a lot of money? Or, are you looking for people that already have money, but, are trying to find better ways to spend it? A lot of us here will also find, especially those of us from outside North America, we're going to find that there's a connection culturally. Sometimes as a social media manager, connecting with other people who are of the same cultural demographic as us. For example, I'm South Asian. So, there might be a connection between other South Asians because I can understand culturally how they market and what that expectation is. So are you sure that that's your target market, or are there more characteristics you really need to validate? And we'll talk a little bit about validation as we go through this masterclass as well. So when I talked to Rachel about doing this masterclass, the first thing I asked her was, Rachel, what's the target market? Who is it that's in this class? And she said that there were a lot of you that are just like me, a bit more on the mature side. I'm entering my 40s. So a lot of references you're going to see here are from the 80s and 90s. So if you haven't yet caught on, that's an image from a movie called Weird Science. And the concept of Weird Science is those two gentlemen on each side of Kelly LeBrock work to build the perfect woman for them. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about building the perfect client. And in the movie, if you haven't watched it, you really should watch it just for a laugh. It's really great how they talk about different characteristics and what is it that they see in that person and what they'd like to have. So what I'd love to do now is go through the concept of how we're going to build the perfect customer. And we're going to do that by really focusing on two things, on core markers and secondary markers. So in this presentation, I'm trying to stay away from all of these fancy academic terms, mainly because I have trouble saying them. But for the most part, core markers are data that defines who your core market is. So you might tell me, Bob, I want to do social media management for women who are leaders in their industry. So females, perhaps over the age of 30. So those would be your core markers. Everything else can vary. Remember how we talked about being able to have different levels of target markets, having sub-target markets. So your core markers are the 2 or 3 variables that never change. You know that you always want to work with women, and you know that you want to work with women who are leaders within their industry. For the most part, that usually means they're probably over the age of 30 or of a more mature age because they've spent that time building their credibility and that leadership. So that will never change. What may change are the next part, which is secondary markers. Secondary markers help flesh out certain core markers. Sorry. So what would happen is you would say, Bob, I want to work with female leaders in sort of the leadership industry. So you would say, I want to work with women who are over the age of 30. Those would be your core markers. Your secondary markers may be, I want to work with women over 30 who work in the life coaching industry. That may be a secondary marker. Or another secondary marker might say who work with businesses, or who work with women on both business and in life. So secondary markers are those other elements that allow you to adjust your target market. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. These are also variable. So as you evolve, earlier we said that when you develop your target market, you're going to evolve. As you evolve, these are the markers that change. So you're always going to work with women over the age of 30, but you might say, okay, well, now I'm not so focused on women who are working in life coaching. Now I'm focused on women who are working with those other women in the corporate world. So secondary markers always change. The reason why secondary markers are also important is as you're developing your target market, you're going to test, you're going to pivot, you're going to get feedback, you're going to see what works and what doesn't work. Secondary markers allow you to sort of change. So you might say, Bob, and this happened to me. Actually, I'll use an example of me. So I said to myself when I first started, I want to work with entrepreneurs who are starting up because they need my help and because I love them and I care about them. So that was my secondary marker. My core markers were entrepreneurs over the age of 30 who were forced entrepreneurs. So these are people who've lost their job or who want a side hustle. I want to work with those are my core markers. My secondary markers were, but I want them to also be in startup phase. I want them to have a good heart. Well, what I realized as a secondary marker, those people didn't always have money for what I do. So I had to adjust my secondary marker to be something more along the lines of these are people who are in a corporate job. who are a director, a VP, some sort of business development, who have a bit of income to invest in what I'm doing. So that's a good example of how I can change my secondary markers. My core markers are still there. Forced entrepreneurs over the age of 30. I just changed those secondary ones. Now, what I really want to get across is this research that we're talking about, it's not about finding places to hawk your wares. This is not about me telling you, if you build this profile of this person, and you will sell them everything and it'll be a perfect relationship. You'll never have to, that is not what this is. It's about understanding the market's core attributes. So who is it that they are? What are their core values? What do they love? What do they hate? And learning to sell in a way that resonates deeply with them. So being able to talk to them in a way that they get and they connect and they say, you know what? I like you, Bob, because you get me. You know me. I like you. I trust you. This isn't just me saying, hey guys, if you get these core markers and you build this program and sell it, you can just wash your hands of it. This is not that at all. Relationship, in reality, we're in a relationship economy. This is what we're talking about here. Oh, went too far. Let me go back. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about the different variables that you can use. So remember, this exercise is now, what I'd like you guys to do is on a piece of paper, wherever you are in SMU world, I kind of want you to look at some of these variables here and write down what you think your perfect client is, whether you have it now or whether you'd like them to be that. What's their age? What's their gender? What's their income? You know, are they high income? Are they making a ton of money? Or are they, you know, kind of making, you know, maybe they're only making 50 grand a year and your job is to help them get to 100 grand a year. And when we talk about income, it could be their personal income or their business income. Another variable you want to ask yourself is, what's their education level? Do you want to work with people who have post-secondary, who have gone to college or university? Or are you looking for people that are sort of street smart, that have the hustle, that, you know, are willing to do the work, that aren't theory-based, that are actually experience-based? What's the relationship status? Are they married? Are they single? Are they in a relationship? Do they have children? You know, then you really start to get into secondary markers like, what kind of car do they drive? Believe me, guys, when I tell you, people who drive an import, it is proven scientifically, actually think differently than people who drive a domestic. If I drive a Ford and the person beside me drives a Honda, you're going to find different characteristics between us. So that's important to understand. Do they rent and own assets? Do they own a home? Do they own the car? Are they renters? Are they digital nomads that love to travel everywhere and never sort of invest in anything? What do they do in their leisure time? You know, are they spending more time in yoga? Or are they spending more time in playing bridge with friends? Are they spending more time just in front of the TV watching Netflix? You know, what is it that they do in leisure time? And I know some of these characteristics, these secondary core markers, they sound a bit kind of out there, but I promise you, when you're building the perfect client, you want to know all these characteristics, and you'll see why as we go through this masterclass, why it's an important characteristic, why these are important characteristics to go through. Do these people travel? Does your perfect client travel a lot? Are they staycation kind of people? Do they travel just to North America? Do they like to travel to, what is their travel like? Because again, that'll tell you, and I'll give you an example, that'll tell you their level of risk. Because people who travel are not as risk sensitive. People who don't travel are risk sensitive. So if they're investing in social media with you, you've really got to determine if they're risk sensitive. How are you going to prove your case? If these are people who travel everywhere all the time, they're not as risk averse. And then if maybe you guys have other suggestions, and that's a great opportunity to go to the chat. So right now, I'm sure a lot of you are writing down some of the characteristics and going through all that. Are there other suggestions? What are other characteristics maybe you want to share in the group chat with everyone who's listening, or who's watching, sorry. No one has comments? Okay. Hopefully that's because you guys are all writing down your these characteristics of what you want them to look like. By the way, it doesn't hurt to name this person, this perfect person that you're building. Give them a name, and we'll go from there. Sorry, I'm probably covering there we go. Parents, okay. Parents of, so that's a good one. Are they parents? You know, do they live with their parents? Oh, okay. Nicole already has Rob and Joanne. That's wonderful. Nicole, if you feel comfortable, maybe you can share a little bit about Rob and Joanne just to give people an idea of what an avatar or it's a perfect client looks like, we also call them avatars. Nicole's probably just typing some stuff out now. They are parents of an infant, parents of teenagers. Guys, that's wonderful. So that gives you an idea of are their kids a bit more self-sufficient, or are they having to spend more time in the care of their children, which means that they probably have less time to invest in their business. So that's wonderful, Kunal. That's great. Are there other characteristics that you guys think might help those of us writing down perfect client characteristics? Cool. Okay. So hopefully you guys have written all that down. Okay. Nicole says Rob is a successful business owner who's been in business for 20 plus years and bases decisions on analytics and research. That's wonderful, Nicole. That tells you exactly what Rob needs to make a decision to purchase from you or to purchase from your client. So just so everyone gets a sense what Nicole's written, great example. It's really detailed. So again, some of you may not get to that level. Feel free to be a little bit more basic, but that's wonderful. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. I don't want to hold you guys up. We only have 4 hours for this class. I'm just kidding. We're not here for 4 hours. I'm just kidding. Let's go to our next slide. There we go. Now we're going to talk about primary research. So for those of you, again, my friends from the 80s and 90s, if you remember this movie, it's called Single White Female. The premise of this movie is Jennifer Jason Leigh gets or moves into an apartment and becomes obsessed with her roommate and basically becomes her. Well, guess what? Primary research is learning how to become just like your perfect client, just in a less creepy way. You don't want to sort of change yourself to match them at all, but at least it gives you an idea. So how do you become them? How do you understand, based on those demographics we just wrote down earlier, how do you become that client? Well, you want to resonate with this market and with this person. You want to become a reflection of its ideal self. So if this person is, again, over 30 and they're women and they're focused on leadership, you're really asking yourself, well, when they're not focused on leadership, what are they doing? Do they have a family? What are they doing in their off time? Do they do yoga? Are they focused on health? How family-centric are they? Do they spend a lot of time with their own parents, their sisters, their brothers? How big is their family? Where do they spend their Thanksgiving? You almost really want to become that, because when you do that, you understand how these folks make decisions, what motivates them to take action to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So that was horrible typing there. Often be learned. What I should have written there was often learn by examining what else they consume, which is what we talked about. So when I say consume, what's their favorite movie? What's their favorite song? What are they doing in their off time? Do they spend time with girlfriends? Do they have more guy friends? Do they have a plethora of friends? As social media managers, this really also helps you get into, where are they on social? Are they spending time on Instagram? Are they spending time on LinkedIn? Really sort of understand, where it is that they're spending that time. And again, less creepy, but in a way you're digitally stalking them, right? You're really figuring out, what motivates them. How are they spending their time? The key for all this is you're trying to understand how to prove what they need. So once you understand who your client is, your perfect client is, or who your client's perfect client is, you really understand what that need is. So if I tell you, I want to work with women over 30 who are leaders within their industry, well, that's great. But what do they need? If they're leaders in their industry, they're probably really successful at what they're already doing. So what is it that I can provide that they need help with? Well, my first reaction would be, they'll probably need support. They probably need somebody, as these women are growing and developing their brands, and as they become much more successful, as they're getting asked to do larger and larger speaking gigs and perhaps travel, they're going to have trouble with the loose ends. They're going to have trouble with maintaining their social because they've only got so much time in a day. They'll want to maintain a relationship probably with their friends and family still. So that's probably their pain point, is there's not enough time in the day to accomplish what they wish to accomplish. And they're probably hitting a bit of a I shouldn't say glass ceiling, sorry, but a bit of a plateau. They're not, growing. So, what is it that you can prove that they need that you can accomplish for them? Then we have secondary research. So that's primary research. Primary research is really understanding who they are, what motivates them, what do they like. Again, single white female, becoming just like them. Again, if you have not seen the movie, please watch the movie so you don't think I'm crazy. It is a pretty suspenseful drama. Now, secondary research is you really need to prove your primary. Earlier in the masterclass, I did tell you guys, if you figure out who your perfect client is, that's great, but are you sure? This is how we're going to prove we're sure. You know, guys, as entrepreneurs, especially in the digital world, we forget about these big old buildings in all our communities called libraries. And although I'm in Canada, I'm very familiar with the US library system as well. And I'm sure in other parts of the globe, there are libraries as well. You would be surprised at the amount of resources available at local libraries. I'll give you an example of one of the libraries we have here. They have this program called $1 Million Database. Now, you can look it up if your library carries it or not, but if not, you can probably get a digital subscription to it. The $1 Million Database is based on data that's collected through census through the US and Canada. And what it does is you can find companies based on the company's income level. So if I told you, I want to do business with corporate companies doing $1 million plus a year, the $1 Million Database at the library will allow me to find those clients. So the reason why the secondary research is important is, let's say I've said I'm looking for women over 30 who are leaders in their industry. Now, based on their company name, I can look online and see, are these women earning over $1 million? Because maybe that's a secondary characteristic. And I shouldn't say, are these women? I should say, are there companies earning over $1 million? If I see very few earning over $1 million, I may have to go back and adjust what my target market is. If I look in this $1 Million Database and I see a ton of women killing it and making amazing income, which I'm sure Rachel is probably one step away from there, if not already there, then I validated the fact that these are great clients. And I validated the fact that they need my help to get from 1 million to 2 million and to 10 million. Because if you're only seeing at the $1 million mark and not at the $10 million mark, and when I say this mark, I should say in annual revenue, that's how you can validate it. So visit your local library. Again, you might be surprised at the research that's available for free as a resident that you could use. Government statistics are huge. So I've forgotten the name in the US, but in Canada, we have Statistics Canada. So every year we all get this census report that we have to fill out. It collects data on us. Well, all of that data is then put together and listed publicly and openly on a website called Statistics Canada. So actually, if you're right now, if I'm talking to you and you're in Canada, or even if you're based in the US, but you want Canadian clients, you would want to go to the Statistics Canada website and you can look up which communities have people that fit your demographic. So if you were to say, Bob, I want to work with people who are over a certain income bracket, who are married and maybe who have assets like a home, you probably wouldn't look in a rural community like Barrie or, like a really small rural community. You'd probably want to look in Toronto or in Ottawa. And, again, these really more urban markets. So government statistics can validate, first of all, are those people there? Are they in Toronto with that level of income, that gender that you talked about, that relationship status? And how many are there? If you say to me, well, Bob, I've proven they're all there, but the problem is there's only a population of 50,000. Well, that might not be a great place to find clients because you want a populace where there's a lot of people. You want a market where there's a ton of people because you're probably going to be competing with other people as well. Trade magazines, really, really great if you're niching in a certain industry. Let's say home builders. Let's say manufacturing. If you're, medical, so doctors, chiropractors. Trade magazines are really cool ways of looking at who is advertising in those magazines and what they're advertising, right? So let's say dental, for example. If you were to grab a dental magazine, in North America, one of the biggest trades in dental is Henry Schein. So if you're trying to say to me, Bob, I want to work with dentists who are of a certain age and a certain income level to do their social media, you might want to go into the magazine and look at who are doing ads in there. And if not dentists themselves, are there other third parties, let's say like Henry Schein, doing ads? And how are they doing the ads? Are they talking about offering discount codes, or are they talking about service, or are they talking about experience? What are those core values they're talking about? And that's going to really validate if your clients you can respond to that. So if you tell me I want dentists who are over the age of 30, who are men, who maybe they've just opened their practice and they're a year in, and you open a trade magazine for dentists, and you're looking at Henry Schein sort of talking to this demographic, because typically you'll see newer dentists reading those magazines than the more experienced dentists. That'll validate that, wow, if Henry Schein is investing that money, that's there. You'll also find articles in these trade magazines related to the industry. So they might talk about the future of dentistry. they might talk about technology changes in dentistry. And guess what? If you're doing social media for that industry, that's a great place for content. Just a little tip. You can also look online, but please, if you're looking online as secondary research to try and prove your target market, to try and prove these characteristics of people are where I think they are, check your source. Because I think a lot of people assume Google is the end all and be all, but it is not. If you're looking on Google for information, make sure the source you're checking is a valid source. It's not just somebody, you know, putting up information in their basement that hasn't validated or accredited where the information's come from. You know, checking Statistics Canada online, that's totally fine. But checking Bob's Bargain dentist data might be something you want to question there. So just keep a heads up there. Now, another way of secondary research that really helps you besides the library, the government, the statistics, trades, and online, guys, it never hurts to do surveys and interviews. You will see a lot of folks online asking that question. Hey guys, if I had this service, would you pay for it and how much? And a lot of entrepreneurs get nervous with this because they're saying to me, Bob, I don't want people to know what I'm doing. I don't want them to steal my idea, or I'm in a side hustle. I don't want, you know, my full-time employer to know what I'm doing. There's lots of different ways to execute surveys and interviews using third-party resources, right? Like SurveyMonkey. So, you know, you can fill in your company name and, you know, share that around. You can use a lot of local institutions like co-working spaces and incubators and any place where entrepreneurs are being educated, chambers, BIAs, and say, hey guys, you know, I'd love to share this out to your membership. You know, is there a cost to it? Hey, I'm a member. Can we do that? Survey and ask and interview people about what you're trying to develop and build and sell based on those characteristics. So when you're doing a survey, you've said you want dentists who are men over the age of 30 who've just opened their practice for the first year. That's who you're developing the surveys for. And when you come back and get that data and see that, wow, these guys are willing to invest in social media management, you know you have validated your idea with secondary research. So hopefully a lot of this is making sense. Another one I often like to see, I know, you know, many of us in the SMU group are not a fan of free services, but a lot of times microservices are a great way to test and validate your idea. So find the dentist who is a man over the age of 30, who's in the first year of practice, and say, hey, can I do your social media for 5 days? And in 5 days, I mean, we all know in 5 days, what impact can you really have? But, you know, this is just an example. In 5 days, if you see your reach go up more than 100%, you know, would you consider buying my service? And in those 5 days, you'll learn, first of all, is that client a pain in the butt? Do they micromanage me? Is it hard to find content that actually develops the following that I want, the reach? So microservices are a great way to, again, using secondary research to prove who it is your target market is meant to be, to prove that, yes, this is going to work, this is who I want. You can do it for 30 days as well, but again, that's 30 days of you doing work without income. So you really want to be mindful of how long you're doing it for. It could be a 2-week trial as well, but make sure it's a trial of people who fit your demographic. What you'll often find is people who do this online have an application process because they're trying to weed out the tire kickers and the people that aren't great fits. Before I move on, I've done a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask before I keep going? Because I've got a lot more stuff I want to share. And I just want to make sure nobody is overwhelmed. If everyone's doing okay, can I get a yippee-ki-yay? I won't say the second part of that. A yippee-ki-yay will tell me you guys are doing okay. It doesn't have to be spelled correctly. I won't hold you to that. Good. I'll take good. Doug is good. All right. I'll take that. So let's move on to that next slide. Oh, we got more coming in. I just want to make sure no idea how to spell that. Yippee-ki-yay. Yeah, no more ideas, no judgments on spelling. And by the way, Nicole, as Canadians, we might even spell it differently than our friends over the border. So maybe that was a bad example, but thank you. Thank you guys for staying interactive here. Another way of applying secondary research is a lot of you are going to get into niches. Now, one of the challenges with target market, and Rachel and I have talked about this before, is, you know, a lot of you kind of niche on industry. And that's okay, but it's not so much about the industry as it is about the people within that industry. So once you've figured out your perfect client, what their core values are, what their demographic is, who they are, that can translate to most industries. So if, for example, if you were to say to me, Bob, I'm looking for really lazy men over the age of 40. who are doctors. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't know that you'll find lazy people as doctors, because that's like a 9-year, unless they've gotten their degree from someplace far away in another galaxy. So when you're developing your core characteristics and you're saying, well, Bob, I've worked with dentists, I want to work with dentists. But if your core values of this perfect client does not fit your industry, you'll know niching in an industry is not going to work for you. But if it does, there's this Google search that you can do called Directory of Business and Trade Organizations. Literally type that sentence into Google and it will come up with a bunch of different trade organizations that you can talk to. So if you say to me, Bob, I only want to work with chiropractors. When you Google that, you'll find, now remember, Google is regionally based, so it'll base it on where you're searching from. It will find you the nearest organization based on niche. So if you say, I want to only work with chiropractors, it may pull up Chiropractors of Ontario. So that's a really cool way of finding a niche organization, going back to validating your idea, talking to them, maybe doing some microservices for them. Don't be afraid to look at consumer websites like Kijiji, Wagjag, and Udemy. You'll actually find your target market might be there shopping around, and it's all about looking at what they're consuming on those websites. A competitive analysis. So this is a bit of an old school trick I got from a mentor, and I love it, and it still works. A lot of times in secondary research, competitive analysis is huge. You want to determine if your competitors are doing it, is there a reason why? So I had this mentor, and he would say, Bob, if you want to know how well your competitor's doing, literally just sit on a bench outside their door. And he would say, do that, and look who's walking in, and look who's walking out with or without a bag. Now, this is a bit old school, but it worked. I would see people go in and go out. I would see people go in and come out with a ton of bags. I would look at really quickly, I would try and summarize their age, their demographic, their gender, their, kind of what they're wearing, which kind of can tell me their affluency. Can I see them walk to their car? What kind of car are they driving? So when I saw who walked in and out of a store, I knew which demographics were working for that competitor. For you guys who are more digitally, sort of work in the digital space, your store is Facebook groups. So you want to be in Facebook groups or even LinkedIn groups, and you want to watch who's interacting, who's responding well, who's not responding well. You want to look at people who have left the group, right? You're really getting a sense of who's doing well in the group to determine if that, and again, ideally it's a Facebook group of people that you want in your market. So let's say a Facebook group of young professional dentists. You're watching who's interacting there and how they're interacting. And don't be afraid to mystery shop them. There's nothing wrong with testing the services of your competitors. What's that consumer experience, whether you're doing it in their store or whether you're doing it online? Walk through that process and pretend, remember, single white female, try and be your client and say, if I were a 30-year-old dentist who was the first year in my business, and I'm walking through my competitor's process of intake, is this working for me? Why or why not? What can I change? And again, that will validate if not only if the process is working, but you may say to yourself, you know what? This is not a great niche. I need to go back to my secondary core markers, and I need to adjust. Maybe it's female dentists over the age of 30 probably respond better to this. Now, what we talked about earlier was really doing all of this work, becoming this client, understanding who they are, and really feeling sort of their pain because you want to develop their pain point. So earlier we talked about, can you develop what it is that they need? You got to figure out what their pain point is. So if you said, Bob, I want to work with women who are leaders in their industry over the age of 30, who are in life coaching, well, what's their pain point? We kind of talked about their pain point is that they're too busy. Earlier, I had a mentor who gave me this concept of heaven and hell, and she did it in a way that was phenomenally engaging. And she would simply say, Bob, when you're talking to a client and you want to figure out their pain point, or if you already know their pain point and you want to communicate it, once you know their demographic and once you know their age, their gender, you want to take them into what heaven and hell is for their characteristics, right? So if these are women who are leaders, who are doing life coaching, what's their hell look like? So for hell for them might be that they're too busy, that they're not feeling like they're having an impact, that they're feeling like the work that they're doing is not meaningful and making them happy. So once you figured out what their hell is, you want to figure out what their heaven is. Their heaven would be that they're actually helping people. They're making an impact. The work that they're doing is allowing them to develop relationships that they didn't have before. That's what their heaven is. Your job is to figure out how to get them from hell back to heaven. And that's their pain point. So everything I just talked about is all about time management and resource management. If you're offering them a solution of social media management and you say to them, hey, I could get you more followers, they might not care. But if you can say to them, hey, I can get you people that care about what you do and you can have a meaningful impact on them, you've hit their pain point. Now, if this, we've talked about women who are leaders in life coaching. If this were men who are in their 50s who are selling widgets, that's a completely different pain point. So you really, really want to understand what that is for that person. And remember, you've become them, you've stalked them, you've done pretty much everything that they do. So you should have a good sense of what that looks like. And then ideally you validated it through your research in the library, statistics, surveys. You validated that this is their pain point. Now guys, I just want to stop here for a second. I realize this seems like a lot of work, but I promise you, if you love what you do and you really want to develop an income for yourself, this can be a lot of fun. Because the moment, I don't remember, I'm going to do another 80s reference, but many of you who remember this game called The Legend of Zelda. I was obsessed with The Legend of Zelda. And the reason was, when they developed that game, they made it so that you were always unlocking something. You were always getting to another level, another tier. And most video games are designed that way. But Zelda did it in a way that you were like, ah, right? You're the angel singing. And that's what this is. When you're figuring out their pain point, when you're getting a lot of no's and you're getting a lot of people saying that doesn't work for me, the moment you get even 3 people that say to you, man, you're exactly it. That's exactly how I'm feeling. And I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to share something really vulnerable with you. I've worked with clients where I've walked through this process with them and they've cried. And I'm both genders. I've had men who have teared up who said, that's exactly my hell and I don't know how to get out of it. And it is such a meaningful experience. So don't see this as work. See this as an opportunity for you to impact and have some really, really cool opportunities and relationships. Once you've done the pain point, once you figured out what it is they need, can you do it? Can you fix that? Can you get them from heaven to hell? Can you get them from hell to heaven? But more importantly, if not, can you find someone who can? If you're saying to me, well, Bob, this is my niche, this is my client, this is what I want to do, but I'm not as skilled yet on doing this, and their pain point is not so much Instagram, but LinkedIn, what can you do to get better at LinkedIn? Can you take some of Rachel's classes? Can you find another social media manager that's great at LinkedIn and you guys work out a collaborative opportunity? So even if you can't do it, can you find it and can you get it? Because if this is the client base you want, you just want to find that solution. And once you've proved you've solved the pain point, now you're going to develop something called a value proposition. A value proposition, this is kind of the textbook definition, which is really boring for me. But the value proposition is really, why is it that these people want to buy from you? So you've determined who is your target market. You've validated it through primary and secondary research that, yes, this is my market. This is who I want to serve. And yes, I can make money here. Now you've figured out their pain point. So how am I going to get them from hell to heaven? You've done all that. But now you got to figure out a way to explain it to them so that they get it right away. How many times have you looked at someone and said, wow, I really love their branding, but I don't know what they do? So it's really important to be able to express that. And that's what a value proposition does. So, that statement to convince your potential consumer, your referrals, your strategic partners, how you add more value and solve a problem is so very important. Okay. And especially when they're comparing you to other social media managers. So really quick, I just want to go through an exercise. I really hope, guys, grab your pens and papers if you like. I want you guys to pick 3 reasons why a customer would buy from you specifically. So remember your earlier target market. You've defined their age, their gender. You've defined all these characteristics. You've ideally figured out what is it that you can help them with. Why are they going to buy from you? Are they going to buy from you because you're affordable? Are they going to buy from you because you're experienced? Think of 3 reasons personal to you and your business why people want to buy from you. It could be point form. It doesn't have to be sentences. It could be words. So I just want you guys to take a moment and do that right now. And I'd love to hear if anyone feels comfortable sharing in the chat, what's a reason they feel like someone would buy from them. It could be that, again, you're experienced, that you know this industry well. We see a lot of military wives entering social media management and doing a lot of social media work for those that are in very structured industries like financial. So why are some reasons? And it could be very personal. It could be that you're a personable sort of person, that you get social media, that you're a listener, that you're willing to work hard. Just 3 different reasons why people would buy from you. Okay. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. If anyone wants to share in the chat a particular reason, that's fine too. I can wake up at midnight for the customer. Oh, that's right. So, Kanal, I'm assuming that you're overseas. So when we're awake, you're asleep, and when we're asleep, you're awake. So really great point. You know, social media isn't a 9-to-5 job. Social media really is, especially when it comes to markets, sort of platforms like Twitter, it's a 24-hour thing. So wouldn't it be cool to work with someone like Canal that can say to me, hey, if you want to sell to people across the world, I can do it on a regular basis. That's great. Thank you, Canal. So once you've written down 3 points of why people want to buy from you, I want you to make a sentence out of it. So let me give you an example. So I'm not going to use this is a no pitch session, so I don't want to use my business now, but I have a client, and this client does first aid education, first aid training. And when I asked her to write down 3 reasons why people would buy from her, she said, first of all, I'm licensed. So you'd be surprised how many people do first aid education, but aren't actually certified. So being certified and licensed is important for insurance regulations. She's experienced. So she's not just somebody that practices on a dummy. She's spent time working in industries where she's had to apply what she's learned. And if you know anything about first aid safety and training, whenever poop hits the fan, for lack of a better word, sometimes people freeze, and she doesn't do that. She has the ability to manage the situation and be able to teach you to manage the situation so you don't freeze, right? So she's certified, she's fully experienced, and then her 3rd reason was she does it in a way that makes it easy to understand. So basically what she does is she doesn't use industry terms, right? So even first aid, she'll use a word like caring, right? So in care in office, she'll use vernacular that really resonates with people who just don't understand all of those technical terms in first aid. So her sentence would be something along the lines, of my value proposition is I'm licensed, I'm experienced, and I present the format in an accessible way. That's a value proposition. As soon as I, as an office manager who has to get certification, first aid certification for my employees, as soon as I hear that, that's 3 pain points she's answered. She's allowed my insurance regulators to be happy by being certified. She has proven that I'm not bringing somebody in that's going to goof about and screw us around by being experienced. And she's promised me that she'll do it in a way that my staff aren't going to whine and complain and fall asleep or play on their phones. That's a value proposition. So based on those 3 different reasons why people buy from you, make that a sentence. That, my friends, is your value proposition. So let's take a step back. You've figured out the characteristics of your target market. You've figured out exactly who it is you want to sell to. You've then validated, yes, this is a market that will buy from me, and this is a market I can do well in based on where I am. Then you've now taken 3 reasons. You've then figured out how to take them from hell to heaven. You've figured out their pain point. You've figured out 3 reasons why they're going to buy from you because they can solve that pain point. Now you should have a sentence, 1 sentence, or maybe 2, that talks to your perfect client about why they should buy from you. And by the way, that sentence will probably inevitably answer their pain point as well. Does anybody have any questions about what a sentence could look like, what it should look like? If anyone feels comfortable sharing their sentence, please feel free. If not, that's okay. We can always chat about it another time. Okay, not seeing any chats, so I'm just going to keep going. We're almost to the end, folks. I know I'm trying to save some time for us to ask questions. Again, my lovely 80s reference of the Equalizer. This is not the Denzel Washington version. This is the original Equalizer version. I just want to share this one slide of how do you get your target market to buy from you. We've talked about figuring out their characteristics. We're figuring out how to validate that they're the right person for you. We figured out, how you're going to become them, absorb them, understand them, relate to them. We've talked about how you're going to develop, understand their pain point and develop hell to heaven scenario for them. And now we've talked about how to develop a value proposition. Social media for small business owners really is the great equalizer. But what happens with it is a lot of folks don't use their digital assets effectively in terms of the customer experience. So you could have the perfect value proposition, the perfect image, the perfect solution. But if you haven't expressed that on your website and social media, you're going to lose your clients. I'm sure you've attended other masterclasses or heard about this concept of bounce rate. Bounce rate is basically somebody comes to one of your digital platforms and then goes away without buying anything. That takes away from conversion. Is your website easy to navigate? Is your social media easy to navigate? Does it express what it is you do and how you do it to your market and your demographic? What image does it project? Does it show something along the lines of, this is who I am and what I do? These are my core values. Is that expressed? Are you interesting? You know, that 80-20 rule of really you're talking about interesting content for your target market 80% of the time, and perhaps you're selling 20% of the time. If your content's not interesting or valuable for your target market, they're going to bounce and they're not going to come back. Talk about lifestyle content. If you're somebody who works with a brand that does yoga, let's say you're working with a yoga studio, don't just talk about yoga studios. Talk about yoga mats, talk about water bottles, talk about other lifestyle components of health and wellness, mindfulness, breathing exercises. You can even talk about yoga from a pain resolution point of view, making your back stronger and feeling better. You know, does your website and social media look similar to other brands? How are you expressing what you do and how you do it in a way that's unique to you? If you're just looking at your competitors and rob and duplicate, it's the new form of R&D, which is rob and duplicate. If you're just rob and duplicating what your competitors are doing, well, that doesn't really show your target market how well that you're doing. Your copy could be on point, but visually, if it's not on point, it's not going to work. And guys, especially if you're side hustling on a 9-to-5, what's online about you? Google your name. You'd be surprised how many people I meet, wonderful, wonderful, well-intended people, go through this process of developing a target market, developing the characteristics, doing primary research and then secondary research to validate that market, doing the pain point, validating the pain point, going from hell to heaven scenario, then developing a value proposition. And then all they find online is people saying, this person did a really poor job. No matter how perfect you communicate to your market, you need an online reputation that is akin to who you are and what you do. And I don't mean going to LinkedIn, asking for a boring recommendation says, Bob was wonderful, he was great, he did it. I mean, when people are talking about you online, good or bad, preferably good, are they talking about you in a way that your target market resonates with? When I do a LinkedIn recommendation, I ask people, hey, do you mind if I write the recommendation and send it to you for approval? They love that because then they don't have to kill time on coming up with something, but then I can write something that my target market will resonate with, right? And that person will put it into their own words, put it on. So what's online about you is a huge part of target market, because no matter who your target market is, unless they're not digitally savvy and they're afraid of the internet, they're probably going to find out a lot about you. And online really helps with your referral basis as well. So as I end this presentation, the number one thing I love to ask, to tell people is, I've given you all this great stuff. All of you are totally pumped. You guys are like, I'm going to own this. When I leave this masterclass, I'm going to have the best, perfect client base by the end of the week. And then you don't do anything. The only way everything we've talked about in this masterclass is going to work, you got to do it. Just get out there and do it. Try it. Dedicate 3 to 4 hours a week developing this target market scenario. And I promise you, it will make your marketing and your funnel so very much easier. So I hope that pretty much covers everything we want to talk about. I put my email in there if you guys want to ask me questions outside of the masterclass. Rachel, I'm hoping that's okay. Or just Google search me as Bob Minhas. I didn't want to put any of my branding here because this is not about me selling. This is about me telling you guys, these are, you guys all have a great opportunity in SMU to develop some really cool target market scenarios. And if you need help, I'm in the group with you. Please reach out. We can definitely talk more about it. However we can help each other and support each other. Now, I've left 5 minutes. Tell me if anyone, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about all the stuff we've gone through, to see if there's questions about target market or anything we've talked about. I think we're doing okay. Ideally, that means I've done something right. I think so. Remember, guys, if you don't have any now, you're welcome to post in the group later, if that's okay by Rachel, and we can talk more about it, or however the process is that we continue to communicate. That's fine by me. It is a lot to soak in, Erica. You're right. And that's the thing about this presentation is it could feel overwhelming. A lot of times what I find with entrepreneurs is they'll do this, and then they'll sit back and they'll process, and that's okay too. When I say do it, you may come back to this and watch this presentation on a replay again, and that's okay. You got to work at your own pace and absorb it as you are comfortable doing it. But again, everything we've talked about, totally doable because I've done it. Thank you, Emma. I can't quite see what your emoji is. It comes up as a square because I'm a PC guy, but I'm hoping it's not a middle finger. I'm hoping it's a smiley face, which is wonderful. I'm just going to assume. If nobody else has any questions, thumbs up. I'll take a thumbs up. Thank you, Emma. If nobody else has any questions, class, if you'd like to leave 3 minutes early, you're welcome to do so. Thank you guys so much for jumping on. Please tell me if we can continue to support you in SMU and how we can develop your target market abilities.